One day, a religion teacher was reading the story of Noah to her third grade class. And as she was reading along, suddenly little James raised his hand with a question. And he asked the teacher, "Why doesn't God speak to us the way God spoke to Noah?" And for a second, the teacher was kind of taken aback. She caught herself and she said, "Well, God speaks to us all the time. We just have to learn how to listen." And so the girl sitting next to James gets out of her seat, gets on her knees, bows her head, prays, stands up and says, "I just listened. I didn't hear anything." Imagine being that teacher. You know, there was a time in history where it was obvious that God was speaking to us in everything, in the beauty of creation and in the events of our lives. But in our modern and postmodern culture, that's not so obvious. It's not so easy for us to hear and recognize how God is speaking to us. But today, St. Paul, at the end of his letter, second letter to the Corinthians, offers us a new way of hearing God speak to us. He offers us a new way of recognizing God's presence in everything. But to understand St. Paul, we first have to take a walk with Moses. So I want you to imagine if Moses came up to you and says, "Listen, I've got to hike up to the top of Mount Sinai to meet the Holy One who freed us from Egypt. Can you come and carry one of the tablets with me?" And the next thing you know, it's dawn, and there you are, hiking up the rocky hillside of Mount Sinai. You've got one tablet, Moses got another. And as you start to reach the summit, a warm cloud covers everything, including you and Moses, so you can barely see each other. And you feel all of a sudden surrounded by an intense presence. And out of the intense presence you hear, "Adonai, Adonai." And to your shock, you suddenly realize you know the word in Hebrew for Lord. And as you stand there, you're so freaked out that you just get down on your knees. You can feel the holy presence all around you. It's so overwhelming and intense and yet incredibly beautiful. Whatever we mean by God, this is it. You're not in Kansas anymore. And out of the presence, out of the cloud, you hear once again, "Adonai, Lord, Adonai, Lord." A merciful and gracious God, slow to anger, rich in kindness and faithfulness. The pressure of the presence is almost too much, but you at the same time feel enveloped by this inexhaustible kindness and mercy you never ever want to leave. And you're so pressed down by the intensity of the presence that you are silent. When suddenly, to your left, to your shock, you see Moses stand up and you think, "What is this bearded nut doing?" And he speaks and he says to the presence, "Come with us." And you're thinking, "Are you out of your mind?" And Moses says it again, "Come with us." And Moses' prayer was answered. And as you make your way down the Mount Sinai and back with the people, you find that the presence traveled with Israel through the desert. By day, the presence was there as this cloud. At night, the holy presence was there as a fire. And when they finally made it to the Holy Land and to Jerusalem, and David and Solomon built the temple, the holy presence filled the temple. Forevermore, for every Jew, the temple in Jerusalem now was Mount Sinai. It was the presence of the presence, the Holy of Holies. Now this is where St. Paul comes into the story. Because he studied under Gamaliel in Jerusalem, a devout Jew and Pharisee. He knew very well that the temple in Jerusalem was the only temple and the place of the presence. And yet after Jesus' death and resurrection, Paul does something outrageous. He begins to call any place where we gather, any place where Christians gather, whether it's in Galatia or Corinth or St. John the Baptist, he begins to call those places the temple of God. Somehow, Paul realized that the presence had moved from Sinai to Jerusalem. And now through the risen Jesus and the Spirit, the presence has moved here with us. We, as a community, are the temple of God. We are the place of the presence. And that place is found in each of us, among us, in our word, in our Eucharist. And these two girls today are going to be invited to enter into a new, deep, personal experience of the Holy Presence. Now, at the end of Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, the one we heard read today, Paul says something interesting. And this is how he helps us in a new way to recognize the presence in our lives. Here's what he says. He says, encourage each other. Be at peace with each other. And here it is. Then the God of love and peace will be with you. Encourage each other, support each other. Be at peace with each other, forgive each other. And then the God of love and peace will be with you. Isn't that very interesting? At the beginning of this letter, Paul describes God as the God of encouragement and God as the God of peace. At the end of the letter, he says that we are to embody and extend God's encouragement and peace to each other. And when we embody and extend God's encouragement and peace to each other, the God of love and peace is with us. You understand what I'm saying? The way that we recognize the power and presence of God is by extending Christ's ways to others. We are like musicians. The other night Friday night, I heard these 4 high school seniors, violinists, play for an hour. Play the most beautiful music. And as I'm listening to them, I realized because they were playing, they are extending that beautiful music out from them to us who were listening. And by doing so, the music was somehow in them and in us. And And that's what we are called to do. By extending Christ's ways of acting out to others, Christ will be in us and in those we reach out to. He will be at work in us and at work in them. You see, our faith only really becomes meaningful and powerful and real when we begin to participate in it, when we begin to extend Christ's ways out to others. And then suddenly, maybe quietly, maybe dramatically, you will find the divine electricity pouring out through you and into others. And by the way, I see this happen all the time in this parish. When parishioners collect winter coats for poor high school kids in our area who don't have any, Christ is working in them and extending out into the lives of those kids. When our youth group goes to work with poor kids in North Philadelphia, Christ is at work in our youth and by extension touching those kids in North Philly. When one of our parishioners broke his ankle, a group of people got together and organized meals for this guy for a number of weeks. And when they did this, Christ was in them, inspiring them and extending Christ's presence out to others. And when we stand up for the uninsured and the immigrant and all who are persecuted, Christ is in us and being extended out from us into others. You know, my friends, most of us are not going to make it onto Mount Sinai. Most of us, as we go about our day and our lives, are not going to have overwhelming experiences of the holy presence enveloping us in profound ways. It happens in small and simple ways because we're a people of ordinary saints. So this week, I want to encourage you to extend Christ's ways to others. And as you do so, I want you to be attentive to the great and small ways that He is working in you as you do this, to inspire you to do it, to give you the energy to do it, the insight to do it. And trust that as you do this, you are extending His presence out to others. And when we do this, the presence from Sinai and the temple in Jerusalem will be present to you and to them. Christ will be working in you and through you. Learn to recognize Him and cooperate with Him. Amen.